are recording.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We still have a lady in the audience, which is wonderful. It's the Ask the Guru time, as we lovingly say, and call these sessions. And I'm sure that my colleagues here on the panel will be able to introduce themselves shortly, but the idea really is that it's your opportunity to engage with the experts that we have here, to have your questions answered, and for us all to try to remind you some of the challenges that we face in the industry, as well as answering some of the questions about how to deploy and increase the deployment of IP-based technology. So what I'd like to do is ask each of the panel members to introduce themselves, and then I'll give a short description of their company and what they're doing and contributing, and then we'll engage then in some Q&A session with yourselves, as well as some pre-prepared questions that I have and Paul has as well. So, to my left.
Good afternoon, my name is Indy Clare. I'm from the company Siqura. We're a Dutch company, I'm actually from Amsterdam, and we specialise in surveillance and transmission solutions. We're part of the TK Group, which is a large company consisting of 70 subsidiary companies that specialise in all aspects of security.
Hi, I'm in Korea. I work for UTC Tyco Security as a pre-sales engineer for CCTV, access control and transmission products. We provide a range of security products right across the scope, from fire, intrusion, access, CCTV, based from our Milton Keynes UK office.
I'm Phil Hutton from Tyco Security Products. We're a manufacturer of access, video and other security disciplines. My specialist job at the field is to look after consultants and specifiers and to make sure that what we offer the client at the end of the day meets the requirements.
I'm Andrew Denton, sales manager for a company called Meyertech. Meyertech are a UK designer and manufacturer of VMS control solutions, both analog, hybrid and digital solutions. You may have seen the presentation a little bit earlier on OnVid, and we're one of the UK companies that are backing the standard at the moment for the industry.
Thank you. Well, we've had a series of presentations today covering various areas, and a couple of subjects have popped out of those presentations today, and I think it would be worth the panel exploring it and having the opportunity to give their views on those areas. And the first question I'd like to pose is how you feel the developments in cloud-based capabilities is going to affect the deployment and rollout of what we have in the IP community in terms of the capabilities and flexibilities within the systems that we're offering. So I'll pose that to Andrew.
Yeah, the cloud's obviously the new buzzword. I think the issue is at the moment is the need for bandwidth, and whether the infrastructure in the UK is up to that. Certainly in certain parts of the world where they have a lot better infrastructure, maybe newer deployed internet network facilities, it may be more useful. But certainly in the UK, I think it's going to see a limited uptake until BT, people like that, get things in order to provide the necessary upload to stream all those cameras up there. But certainly it could provide a cost-effective solution for the future for recording.
Phil, from your point of view?
From our perspective, certainly from an access control perspective, we've been virtualizing and using cloud-based solutions for quite a while. So from that perspective, where the data is smaller, as Andrew rightly says, it worked well. And the fact is, if it's repeated services in several locations, it makes it a very solid, resilient system. But for video, I think we're still looking at a group of people that look after video evidence, that want to keep their arms around the video evidence, don't particularly want it to be out somewhere in the cloud, and they want to know where it is to be able to get their hands on it quickly. So I'm not sure that it's still going to be the right solution.
Okay, so it's featured on some of the security issues, and,
Yeah.
and I suppose in many respects the issues we've had just this week with some celebrity photos just sort of amplify that.
Well, there's an issue there, obviously, of whether your storage is being used on shared servers or dedicated servers.
Sure. And you know, data centers have been common over the past 10 or 20 years, and there's nothing new there, but it's the architecting of those data servers, trying to protect your data. Ian, from a UTC point of view, how do you see that?
I think, again, as was mentioned earlier, it is the current buzzword, but I don't think it, from a security perspective, taking off in any big way in the near future, A, because of what was raised with regards to bandwidth requirements, and also because of the data security issues. I think people are going to be a bit concerned about allowing their data to be transferred to some remote location, wherever that might be, named the cloud, but a server located somewhere, and releasing that data to third-party control, I think will remain an issue for some time.
Yeah, and indeed, certainly the role that I had working for government as an advisor, one of the primary conditions when we were looking at outsourcing to third-party BPO companies was that none of the data that's sensitive can go offshore, which of course in itself reduces the cost benefit. Onshore data centers or call centers and so on are that much more expensive. Indy, from your point of view, from a security point of view?
I think exciting times ahead. I think the cloud has potential of becoming the core part of many people's solutions in the future. There's a lot that needs to be done first. More secure, better bandwidth, has already been said. But yeah, apprehension is always normal when something new comes, and I think the market will decide whether it will be embraced as a technology. But I think it could be exciting. All the advantages that people have today with file sharing, photos and their videos and documents, Dropbox, and iCloud, and all that sort of stuff. People have embraced that. I do not see it as a big leap for security video to also use the cloud as part of their solution. As I said, still a number of things need to be done first, but I think there's great potential. I actually do see it in the future.
Good, good. And of course, I suppose the main difference between what we're seeing at the moment with, if you like, non-professional use of the cloud with small clips is the volume of data, because clearly we in the security industry are guilty of having vast amounts of data in relative terms.
You're correct. There is a lot that needs to be done. There's a big difference between constant video streaming and just sending one document up to the cloud. So technology speaking, I think there are certain steps that still need to be improved upon. But I do see it. I see it with great potential for the future.
Excellent.
There is obviously benefits to cloud storage as well, in that you can give access, once the security has been got right, you can give access to other agencies, for instance the police, without them having to actually come out to site and review footage. If you can get the security of the footage right, you could send them a link and password or whatever, and give them access to footage without them needing to travel to a site. So it can have its benefits as well.
And I think that in some areas we're seeing some of that already in crowdsourced video as well. That is an increasing part of...
The police are obviously looking for things that people have uploaded to YouTube and Facebook and things like that. When there's an event that happens, they like to analyse all the video phone footage to try and get clues from that.
And a little known fact, of course, is for anybody out there who is considering supplying video evidence to one of these worthy causes in the event of seeing something, that the police will knock your door and ask for your phone, which they'll then quarantine as evidence should it be needed. A little known fact that people miss on that particular one. I recall having that discussion with the guys in Boston as well as London on some recent events. For the audience then, we posed the first question, so are there any input from the audience?
We haven't most of the two primary ones being that security, and of course that incident that that raises public awareness and the concerns associated with sort of cloud-based solutions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the recent incident that's just happened this past week of the data sources being hacked are certainly alarming. We have to look to that. But it's not the first data hacking issue we've had over the years. And nonetheless, data centers and data storage remotely is going to be an increasing part of what we do, and how we organize that, I think, is key here.
I would add, it does work in some industries. I hear very little about internet banking hacking, for instance. You know, they made
That's
that.
because they cover it up. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Now we know. One thing I would like to say, David, is that I think possibly the domestic environment is going to be the one that's going to utilise the cloud. I think that residential video surveillance.
I think
it's an ideal for that.
There are a number of recent cases, if we look at products, certainly that's on release around the world for, typically baby monitors for parents to be able to watch their children. But unfortunately, those products have been sold from, DIY stores and electronic stores, and they too have been hacked. And I hear what you say, and you're absolutely correct, because they are an opportunity for domestic and small retail organisations to have that. But again, we need to take care that they are being developed appropriately.
Yeah.
Paul's just reminded me as well, another area that I think we need to just focus on is the health and the caring area, and I think that'll be a growing market where we see in the news now about dementia and Alzheimer's, all those sort of things, and this cloud and CCTV type thing is ideal for keeping an eye on people that are suffering from that. We're going to get tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people getting into that area soon.
And telemedicine, telediagnostics, which is really what we're looking at, is indeed on the roadmap of development of some of these technologies, morphing into a service that can be provided to save people having to go to their doctors, or for constant monitoring in the event that they're having some sort of treatment. So you're absolutely correct. I mean, that is a big growth area that we're seeing. In Asia, it's not uncommon, it's far more common to do self-diagnostics and so on at home with various machines that you can buy in Asia. It's less common, clearly, here in Europe and the United States, but we are seeing a growth in that area, especially with the development and improvement in broadband around our urban areas. I won't necessarily say our country, because I live just outside an urban centre, and our data rate falls off quite drastically compared to my neighbours who have lovely fibre. Speaking of bandwidth and changes, it sort of reminds me of some of the newer developments we're seeing coming on the horizon. The question I'd like to pose to the expert is how we're seeing 4K technologies being embraced and looked at. We're certainly at ISC earlier this year, we saw a raft of 4K camera technology, and certainly 4K displays are here with us already, and even falling in price to become quite reasonable to have at home, never mind in your control rooms. And very soon we will ratify H.265, which is the codec responsible for being able to transmit 4K transmissions through the set-top boxes into those 4K technologies. How is the audience, how is the panel seeing the positioning of 4K going forward? Because I am seeing, certain key manufacturers starting to look at this, and whether it's worthy or not is irrelevant. Who buys an iPhone 5 just because their iPhone 4 no longer has the right number on it anymore? There is this natural urge to move to these new technologies, but is it worth it? Should we do it? Perhaps if we start with you, Indy, from your point of view.
Yeah, I actually do not think that 4K or H.265 will be embraced so quickly. I think it's been a big change moving towards H.264, and I'm still see a lot of analog installations in the UK. I think there's still a big amount of work to do before we make the UK a real IP infrastructure. and to move them already to H.265, I think there's so many third-party software, so many applications that are starting to embrace H.264 to then suddenly change to H.265. I'm not convinced that the change to H.265 will happen too quickly. Regarding 4K, I also think, you know, we're still coming to terms with the great resolutions of 1080p. I think the monitors that we have today have a standard 1080p. I think it was a lot easier to offer 1080p as a resolution because a lot of monitors had that resolution as a standard. I don't see people buying 4K monitors at the moment. I don't see so quickly that people want to have 4K video streams. So I have doubts, to be honest, about how quickly both those will be introduced in the industry. I'm not saying they will never be embraced by the industry. I'm just saying I don't see it happening too quickly.
Ian, your point?
Well, I haven't seen any move towards 4K or H.265 within UTC, and I don't see that happening in the particularly near future. Just to ratify what was being said there, I think I think it took a long time for people to get used to the move from analog to 720p, never mind 1080p, which is now the progress. The progression now is from 720p to 1080p, and that's going to take some time to actually fully deliver. And then, so I can't see the progression from there for a number of years to come. So I can see it growing rapidly in the domestic market for televisions and iPhones and iPads and that sort of thing. But I don't think the security industry is ready for it yet, and I don't think it will be introduced anytime soon.
Okay. Phil?
I think it'll be driven by the domestic marketplace in lots of ways. As the price drops to 4K, I think that'll drive it into our industry. And I think monitors will be the first thing to move to 4K rather than cameras. In terms of H.265, my understanding of it is you get a bigger group of pictures and ever bigger GOP, so you've got less and less iframes, less and less real video. And I think that will be a limitation into where it's actually of value, because as we discussed earlier, there's places where you need to increase the GOP size and sort of decrease the size of the GOP to have more iframes, to get more real evidence in each byte of information. So I don't see H.265 affecting us for a long time, if at all.
Andrew?
Well, H.265 is yet another compression stage further on, and I think it really depends on what you're going to be doing with the video. If you're doing real-time monitoring, PTZ control and things like that, the more you compress video, the more latency you get, and the more processing power you need to decode the video, and that becomes an issue with regard to PTZ and live video. So it can only really happen when PCs and that kind of technology is fast enough to cope with it. And on the other side, the 4K, I mean, there's plenty of cameras out there that are 4, 8, even 12 megapixel. So 4K does, 4K monitor gives you a bit of benefit on that. I think where we'll see the real benefit is going to something like an 8K monitor, where you can actually fit 4 1080 pictures on the monitor at the full 1080p. With a 4K monitor, at 1080p, you can still only see one HD image, which is the same as you can see on a 1080 screen. So there's not massive amounts of benefit there, I don't think. So I think 8K will give the most benefit on that. But as with everything, it's driven by the consumer market, and it's how long before BBC is filming in 8K and broadcasting in 8K before there's a real uptake on that kind of technology.
Because it would be nice if Sky downloaded in anything more than 720, which is where they seem to be stuck at the moment. So my nice shiny new 4K television doesn't have anything to show me at the moment. That's why I was asking the opinion, really. I wanted to understand when I'm going to benefit from it, although it does upscale, so it tells me.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to the cameras, doesn't it, that the BBC and Sky are using. And it's not that long since they went through buying new cameras to meet HD. They're not going to throw those away easily and quickly and replace them with 4K cameras.
No. Speaking of cell phones, so, well, before we move on, is there any comments from the audience there in terms of your views on 4K technology and the next stage, H.265, which is coming down the pipe and is being debated as we speak? No?
The 4K will definitely be pushed by domestic. And then obviously the more it's advertised, everyone's going to think, well, I need it.
Yeah.
But just the way that it gets sold.
But it needs the broadcasting corporations to start filming in 4K first. Until we got that point, then people aren't going to buy 4K TVs just because they might be able to get 4K films in the future.
I mean, nowadays, why do people buy it? You get a good Blu-ray player, they can maybe play 4K. So you've got a handful of things you can use it for. Otherwise, you have it only be better than the guy next door. That's it.
I'll send mine back then. It was a forward-thinking purchase rather than just go for another 1080p television. I made that conscious decision that I'd be ready for it this time. I'm always behind the curve normally. But speaking of being ready for things, what we're seeing is an increasing use of, we mentioned about video bureaus and so on with just cell phones, and I revealed to you that should you submit your video clip for evidence or purposes, that you run the risk of somebody tapping the door and taking your phone and putting it in a little plastic bag, and you may see it one day with white powder all over it, but nonetheless. How do you see the use of body-worn cameras integrating into our surveillance systems? Because we're seeing increasing numbers of body-worn cameras now being deployed by police agencies, public safety agencies, trained ticket inspectors, airport personnel, anybody that has a customer service interface where there may be a threat or a danger to their personal safety. How do you see those types of technologies affecting what we're doing? Indy, from your point of view?
It's not something I thought about, but a few things come to mind. I think similar to the problems that we discussed with cloud technology. I mean, I guess with body-worn cameras, you would have similar transmission issues. You would have to be wirelessly transmitted to the internet or to the cloud or to wireless devices. You know, I can see it happening. I can see, especially now that you have the Google glasses that people are slowly getting to grips with, and that's for viewing, but you can quite easily use those for taking video streaming as well. So I think it certainly could be an asset to the industry. And there will be some work to do, but I think I can still see it as a good advantage to special forces that would need that kind of technology. But I don't really have too much more to say.
Okay. Ian, from UTC's point of view?
I haven't seen any movement towards supporting such technology as yet, but I can see the proliferation beginning because obviously we've got vehicle-borne video cameras we've had with buses in practice for some time now. So I guess it was only a matter of time before it moved to the body. And you can see why the police would like to use it and other public servants would need to use it to protect themselves against the unfortunate social consequences that we live with today. The interesting bit is going to be the capturing of the data. Is the data just captured locally on an SD card or whatever and then transferred when they get back, or is it actually transferred wirelessly via the internet or satellites or whatever? But whichever way it is going to be captured, there's going to be security issues, how that data is managed, where it goes after it's been captured, how long it's retained after it's been captured, because it's going to be filming people in the street who will be doing nothing wrong and won't film, I'm sure. So there's going to be, I think it will grow and it will potentially become useful to the security industry, but there's a lot of processes that need to be put into place to manage it properly before that happens.
Sure. I would agree with what Ian just said. It's the repository that's used to store the evidence and how you manage it. I think there's quite a bit of development in our industry to come yet before it affects what we do. Will it be part of a surveillance system or will it be a separate surveillance system? Yes. There isn't enough bandwidth at the moment for everybody to transmit live pictures over the network, so it would it would probably be a recording system that would be standalone. It wouldn't necessarily come into our realm yet.
Andrew?
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the fact that it would remain standalone. I mean, we're already looking at it in that we've got an app so that the person on the ground can get access to cameras, to the town centre cameras or whatever while they're on the ground, and we're already looking at the ability to then utilise the camera on the device to send data or video back the other way if necessary. Now, I would see that as being a managed by the person on the ground task. So if he was in a situation where he needed to send that video back, he would start that from the device. So I wouldn't expect it to be transmitting video back continuously. It would just be an as and when necessary. And to be honest, about the data management, obviously the data management's got to be right, but filming people through something like that, if it's in a public place, it's no different to having public space cameras, as long as you manage the video in the same way.
Just picking up on all public space cameras, and I think it also picks up on what you mentioned, David. I think the body-worn video will drive more work in facial recognition, purely because it's entirely different from public space cameras. You've got it here, you're close up, you're getting that image, and I think that will drive the law enforcement agencies towards a real-time connection to a control room, running those images against a database to identify who you've got there before you even speak to them. I really do think that the quality of the body-worn video stuff that we're getting now will, and the fact that you're getting that front-on angle, and that's why I asked the question about biometrics ban as to whether these cameras are capable of picking up an iris, because in the future you could get positive identification of that.
And certainly, with my other hat on the chair of the Standards Committee, we are actively looking at a new standard for body-worn cameras for homeland security at the moment. And through that work, I've pushed back to a number of the agencies here in the UK to understand what their status is, as well as around Europe and the Middle East, as well as Australia, looking at the proliferation of body-worn cameras in the public sector, in public safety, as well as in public service. So your ticket inspector on a train, the policeman in the street. And certainly the key companies out there right now, in the UK you have a company called Reveal Media, they're the lead player with the police. In the US we have a company called Taser, the same company that makes the electric guns, as well as a company called Review. Those are the three. I'm sure there are more, and probably next week there'll be 1 million from Shenzhen anyway. But certainly within that realm, the operational process that they're going through is standalone, that they're not offboarding or backhauling the video currently, so it sits on the device. There are two schools of thought about the issue of activating the camera. Certainly in the UK at the moment, ACPO has a methodology where the officer will overtly switch it on. You know, excuse me, madam, I am now recording this. What did you say? And so on. So they are making that process available. And I understand shift to shift of police officers who are trying it, and in some cases rolling it out. They're grabbing on a typical 8-hour shift, 12-hour shift, about 20 to 30 minutes of video of interest. So when they get back to the depot, they're downloading at the station. Sorry, they're downloading that and putting it in a repository, which then interfaces with the evidential side of the video systems. And we're currently debating at committee level whether we want to have full-time shift recording. So when the officer starts his shift, his audio shift, it goes on and that's it. Well, the one question that one lady police officer did pose to me was, what happens when I need a comfort break? You can switch it on. It's okay. So we have to take those things into account. Because there is a school of thought that says the action of the officer switching it on with the member of the public may inflame a situation. Now, the thought is it may disarm the situation or reduce the situation. So a couple of school of thought there in terms of does it or doesn't it. And then we have issues about longevity of the battery, and of course this issue of should we have it real-time backhaul in the event of an incident taking place. There's a difficulty there because of the comms networks and where you are and how you hook to it, and then battery power and so on. So those are debates that are ongoing.
There is, David, a halfway house I've seen. Apologies if you are aware of this, but it's around that buffering ability of being able to constantly record and constantly, after 30 seconds, delete.
Yeah.
And then when you hit that button, you've got the previous 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that our information commissioner is a little bit more comfortable with than permanently recording all the time.
Sure. And we're seeing the increasing use of these devices as well in dash cam. There's an increasing use, the bash cash syndrome for the insurance claims on cars. We're seeing an explosion of devices arriving to sit in your dashboard of your car with an onboard CCTV. I have one. It's not stuck to my new car yet. Still trying to figure out how to power it, but that's a different discussion. Any comments from the floor about body-worn or personal camera devices of any description?
Well, the military have been using it for quite a few years. And with the military one, you can either transmit the signal or they can actually tap into it and see what's happening. So the person who ever did, they can have a button, say like a panic button type thing, they push it, flag a red flag up there, and they automatically log onto the stream. And that works very well.
And we have a similar process for some of the transport operators who are operating vehicles. If they have a dispute with a passenger, they can push a button and it starts a limited transmission to the control room because of the bandwidth of the channel necessary to get back to the control room. But it's quite interesting that the military are using it as well. Yeah. Are any other questions regarding the body-worn cams and so on?
I would imagine also, just thinking about it, that my experience of some face recognition software, some of the problems with at least some of the simpler ones is the viewing angle and the distance of the camera from your face. And I think again, body-worn, whether it's glasses or whether you're lapel, I reckon that could alleviate some of those difficulties. So there could be some interesting developments with face recognition software with body-worn cameras. Sounds like an interesting, exciting possibility.
It is an area that we've been looking at, again, in the standards group, where you post-event analyze it, because the ability to analyze it on board the device, you're suddenly loading it now with different capabilities, and it's making that device far more complicated and far more expensive than it currently is. I mean, body-worn cameras currently sit around about £600, roughly, if you're buying in bulk from these suppliers. So it's quite an acceptable expense for protection of an officer or a public-facing employee. But you're absolutely right. Because you've got it here, you've got a smaller field of view, so you have more pixels density going to that potential target in front of you. It should be far more easier to do that. But speaking about analytics, I don't want to go down the road of facial recognition, because we discussed that this morning and we had some debates about that. But I think I'd like to hear from the panel about your view of the progression and development of the various types of analytics that we're seeing, because there seems to be two sides to the story. The one is the user experience, the operational experience of using analytics in the real world, versus the perception of what analytics can, beneficially wise, bring to the table. I just wonder what your views were going to be about the interaction of the latest generation of analytics with the latest generations of cameras. Not necessarily 4K, but certainly 1080p, which is far more commonplace. Andrew.
It really depends on where you go with the latest generation of analytics. I mean, the latest generation of analytics is really getting into facial recognition and iris recognition and all the stuff like that. Going back from that, then the one that's widely used is motion detection, and I think people find that motion detection side of things very useful. But whether they get into any of the further analytics, such as facial recognition and iris recognition and all the rest of it, and I believe that there's even things out there now that can supposedly tell if you're carrying a gun by the way you walk. but they've all got to be in very controlled environments, and that's what's holding them back at the minute. Like I said, with the facial recognition and angle of view and all that kind of thing, it's they've got to be in very controlled environments. They work in certain places, not necessarily in others. I think there are going to be certain driving forces to that, and things like Omnif releasing Profile C for access control and being able to integrate access control with video easily will lead to more of that kind of analysis being used to check whether the person presenting a tag to the door is the person they're supposed to be.
You're having a second or a third dimension to the access control security
Yeah.
is essential. But I think access control has really, it's slightly different to generic facial recognition because they very much led the way, and it's very reliable in that specific
Yes,
application.
because it's a very controlled environment.
Exactly.
Like I said, there's supposedly systems that can tell if you're carrying a gun by the way you walk, but you've got to have a very specific tunnel that the person walks along past a progression of cameras. And all right, you might be able to say like Stadia and things like that. We might be able to achieve that, but in the town and city centre, I don't think you're ever going to be able to achieve that. But as processors get more powerful and things like that, then they can obviously do a lot more with it.
Phil, Tyco has been at the front of some of this stuff, going into the edge and so on. How do you feel those developments are going at the moment?
Well, we've got several forms of analytics, and just a word of warning, it's the fastest way to lose friends. If we sell it as the panacea, the be-all and end-all to site protection, it's just another string to your bow, your armoury, if you like. But it's not all things to all men. It does need quite a lot of setting on it, and as Andrew says, it needs to be in a controlled environment. Particularly if you wanted to do things like people counting. As soon as you get occlusions from people stood in front of people, then you run into problems with cameras looking at head and shoulder shots, or in a position that the system can really do what it's designed to do. But I think analytics has stepped on from detection of things appearing or disappearing, or objects removed, objects abandoned, etc. I think we've stepped on now to this behavioural type of analytics where we can, for instance, we've got heat mapping now on our system, so that you can see a store real time, which areas of the store are the busiest, by colouring it red, and the coldest colours the least busy. So it's great for doing something like spot marketing information, for checking gondolas to see who's visiting that type of gondola. I'm talking about going a stage further now with even recognising the age of the people that do linger outside that area, and things are moving on at pace. But in reality, I'm not sure that it's always useful to the end user, because nobody's perhaps asked the end user. One of the things that we were always asked to do is till queues building up to be able to dispatch new people to operate tills. Now, the store might not have the resource to deploy more staff. These people aren't sat on shelves with the belter ring to come and sit on the till. So it's not always being developed from the right angle. I don't think, I think people aren't always asking the right questions.
Yeah, one interesting development in transport, certainly, which has been promoted by some of the changes in the franchise contracts, certainly in the UK, has been queue management, because it's a customer service. It's that issue of how efficient is my train company, and queue detection has suddenly, out of nowhere, because it suddenly appeared in their franchises, the new franchises, certain train operators started asking for analytics at the edge because they wanted to be able to, or indeed at the centre, to detect the queues in front of the ticket office, which is part of their service criteria, for which they get fined. So there was an ROI there to avoid the fine.
I think, as Phil says as well, marketing is a big new area for analytics and CCTV, and being able to detect what people are doing when they're shopping, what they're looking at, whether a certain display has the right kind of eye-catching appeal.
Sure. Ian, from your point of view, as UTC can engage with this very much?
I've been looking at the potential of analytics for a while, particularly from our Lenel channel, which is more of an enterprise solution. So I've been looking at and dealing with analytics for some time. But from our more mid-range interlogic perspective, we're starting to do it now. I think we're going to be looking much more at edge analytics rather than platform analytics. So it'll be alarm-driven analytics rather than forensic analytics. But I think the biggest driver at the moment is going to be the marketing analysis, using analytics to drive marketing analysis to determine for the retail, etc., particularly how they can best manage their staff and locate their products, etc. But I have certainly noticed over the last few years that whereas analytics was really aimed at the enterprise solutions, it's being driven down market now. So whereas in the past it would have been motion detection, cruising, masking and camera tamper, you're certainly seeing a demand now for such things as tripwire and object left behind in your lower end products, and now starting to become introduced, and they will continue to be introduced. I think that's going to drive the whole field of analytics in a very positive way.
Indeed, from your point of view?
I personally am a very big fan of analytics. I think we Siqura offer a portfolio of analytics. I think it's only going to get better and better. There's going to be more and more. I think the market's perception and expectation of what analytics can do is only going to drive the analytics industry forward. I even think the imagination of Hollywood is also going to be a driving force, because I think people will see a camera as just an extra pair of eyes and then demand, why can't it detect this or that when an incident happens? And I think I only see the analytics industry getting bigger and bigger and actually adding more value to the current surveillance solutions in place. And I also agree that I think one of the key winners will be the camera industry, which I think we'll see far more analytic solutions on the edge, actually on the camera itself, being able to give faster reactions and faster alarms or alerts. So I can see cameras getting more and more powerful so that they can hold a lot more of these analytic softwares on board. But no, my first opinion is we'll be seeing a lot more analytics, and it will get better and better as customers or markets' demands and expectation levels get higher and higher.
Yeah, I think from certainly from the transportation point of view, that we're the demand that we see in analytics from if you like, the user in that industry are tunnel protection. That's our biggest single request from operators, transport operators, is the monitoring of tunnels to identify unauthorized entrance. So I'll leave it at that. It can be a vagrant, it could be an unauthorized person trying to take a shortcut, plenty of those, all the way up to somebody with a man pack who wants to blow up a tunnel. So anything in between, but they shouldn't be there. And I think that's the biggest. And the second biggest one we have in transport is guideway intrusion. So intrusion onto the tracks, or intrusion into the bus rapid transit lanes. Or in London you see the red routes, where you have bus lanes on the red routes, and vehicles are in those red routes and they shouldn't be in there. So there's analytics on the buses to actually detect that as well. So those are some of the key areas that we're seeing, certainly in transportation, not just in the UK, but globally. And it does change in area. But the challenge we have, certainly in transport, is in one of the environment. What works easily in a shopping mall or in a retail environment where they're looking for gender and so on to position their goods, or queue detection, we have the environment to take into account, the sun, the shine, the reflections, the rain, which mitigates the ability of the analytics to work properly. So we have to set expectations in the environment that certainly we have. Any final questions from the floor? I'm conscious of time now, so we're really just looking at the last final few opportunities to quiz the panel of experts here, the gurus. Anybody got a chance there? Yes.
I would be interested in the international view of my world of policing. If I come up with some form of analytics that my senior investigating officers can use to quickly look through hours and hours of product, how do I convince them that it works without them saying, well, I still want to look at it? How do you get that reassurance across? I don't know if it happens in the Netherlands or in America, but it's getting that reassurance across that this does what it says on the tin.
Yeah, I think in the beginning you're always going to have apprehension. Even in the Netherlands, the police would like to actually, they don't want to. I remember we once had an implementation where just giving them the the video evidence was not enough. They actually had to go on site, confiscate, as you call it, quarantine, I think it was confiscate the camera, actually take the memory card out. They actually wanted it physically and check out the area. But I think what we noticed then is as they began to realise that actually the video evidence was correct, that there was an acceptance creeping in, and they took the video solutions that we delivered as true forms of evidence after a while. Another fear that we had in the Netherlands was, and I think it's also here in the UK, was there seems to be very strict laws about what's viewed as tampered video and non-tampered video. And to provide video evidence, the police had distrust whether they could actually put it in court and present it as untampered video rather than actually having physical evidence being there on site. So the law actually also proved to be a great obstacle in that aspect, and that's a hurdle that still needs to be overcome in many parts of the Netherlands too.
Yeah, I think chain of evidence, which is what you're really referring to, which is why they confiscate the device, it is unfortunately an essential part of the justice process. And if it was you or I that were challenging that video, you'd want to make sure it wasn't simply a file that somebody had transferred, it was a physical device quarantined in a little bag on a shelf somewhere that you could challenge. Ian, from UTC's point of view, how would
I think it's going to be a question of confidence. It's going to be built up by usage. If you step into one side, if you look at technology such as Hawkeye in tennis or in cricket or goal line technology, initially when that was even suggested, it was I'm never going to trust that my ball wasn't on the line. I'm never going to trust that the goal hadn't occurred. But as the technology gets used and people get, particularly football, you get the video evidence as well. You can see that every time Hawkeye says, or the goal line technology says there's a goal, it is a goal. So it's only going to happen with, unfortunately, with use. As the office is concerned, use the technology and grow to trust it. And I think that's the only way it's going to move forward.
Yeah, I would agree with what Ian's just said. And there's a question on usability of data as it's recorded currently within the systems anyway. You know, in a lot of systems that go out into the field and it's RAID 5 and it's this and it's that and it's protected. But how do the police actually get access to that? It's very, very difficult to go into a premises and take data away without actually destroying the system that's there to take evidence in the first place. You've got to take the RAID management system, you've got to take the recorder, you've got to take it all away. As systems grow and you get the body-worn camera coming into that as well, there must be some way to pool this data and make it easier for the police to use as a resource without all the hassle that goes with it, and bulk amounts of equipment, and then be trained to use that equipment to actually get the evidence off.
Which is really where we are, and I hear what you're saying. I think there is a view there of an action that certainly the Department of Justice needs to take in rationalising as we move forward. Andrew?
Well, yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. When something's automated, particularly when it's automated to look for something, there's always going to be a nagging suspicion that maybe that automation has missed something. Without actually sitting and watching the video yourself, you're never going to know whether it's missed something or not. It's all right going on about goal line technology, but when you've got TV cameras there looking at it anyway, they can then analyse, did the goal line technology miss something or get it wrong? But when you're saying, I want to set up an area of interest on this video footage and let the DVR go and return any instances of something occurring in that area, there's no mechanism to check that whatever it does return is 100%
Other than looking at it.
other than sitting and watching it yourself.
Well, I think they've got to watch them the first few times, and eventually they'll learn that it does pick everything up. I mean, it's a bit like things that will junk spam emails. You look in your junk box and you go through them, and if after a while you find that everything in there is always junk, then you get to the point of just telling it, okay, just throw the stuff away.
And the point that you do that is the point at which
you could miss one. Yeah, I mean, if you've done it thoroughly enough, you know what I mean. Or you tweak the way the thing works until you aren't getting false positives, and then you start to trust it.
I think the real question here is how long do you go on vetting what the system's doing before you come to trust it?
And I think the absolute example of that is something that we now take for granted as being fairly solid and reliable, and that's LPR or ANPR technology. What we forget is it's been with us for 40 years. It's taken that long to develop that technology to the point where we're absolutely, trusting of a system that says, but even then, it can still get it wrong. It can be
Still
defeated.
filled by non-standard number plates.
So as long as people follow the rules,
Well,
it's detected.
who isn't going to follow the rules?
I know.
The criminals.
So from that point of view, we certainly are aware that some of these technologies need time to become proven. Certainly in my sphere of operation in transport and safe cities, we have an expression, transport proven. The trouble is, by the time it becomes transport proven, Moore's law has kicked in, and we've already moved on, and we're 3 generations behind. Those things happen. But on that note,
I think the other thing that was mentioned there is this idea of when you have video footage as evidence, is whether you can have multiple primary copies, master copies, and this idea of the police actually seizing discs and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think they're looking at now facilities whereby if you download something as evidence, it actually locks what's left behind, so that you can only have one master, and then you generate working copies obviously from that if needs be, but nobody can go back onto the system and generate a second master without some kind of authorization.
Correct. And we do have processes and procedures in place in that process to make sure that the chain of evidence is maintained, that we look at digital hashing on every tape and all the rest of it. And of course, one example of that, scrolling back a little bit, is in the use of crash data recorders from aircraft, where we make a master tape, you don't touch the original, it goes into a little sealed vault, leave it alone, and then you play with it.
And that's why the police essentially seize the footage,
Exactly.
so that nobody else can get access to it and make another copy, another master copy that could then be manipulated.
And you just know that there's an evidence locker somewhere in the bowels of the police station's evidence frames that says, has anybody got a 3.5-inch floppy drive that I could put this disc into? Because that's what the evidence was recorded on. And I'm sure it'll happen as we move forward. I'm still in 1/4-inch tape, 7-track store horses and so on. So I'm showing my age again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Thank you, gentlemen, for your participation. I'll just ask the floor one more time. Any final comments that anyone want to before we disband today's Guru session? You all want to get on the ACE 14, I know. Excellent. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you.